If you rub yourself with poison ivy, blisters will form almost instantly. So what would happen if you ate a poison ivy salad? Well, the leaves would blister your mouth and throat as you swallow. And as your tissues swell, it could block your airways, making it hard to breathe. When it reaches your stomach, you'll have severe pain and vomiting. And it could even give you terrible diarrhea. Just make sure you don't use the leaves to wipe. Tiny bombs would be strapped to the stomachs of live bats, and the US would drop thousands of them over enemy cities. They would hide inside buildings, and when their timers went off, they would start massive fires everywhere. But during testing, some bats escaped, and they managed to burn down a US military base. Before they could make it work, a much more effective weapon was being invented, and after spending $2 million on the bats, the project was scrapped. Frozen patty is pressed between two heated metal plates. This cooks both sides at the same time, sealing in the juices. In just 40 seconds, the patty is fully cooked and moved to a heating tray. At the same time, the buns pass through a toaster to warm them up. Then the toppings are added, and a ketchup gun squirts the perfect amount onto the bun. It's then wrapped and served in just a few minutes. As the bus plunged into the lake, he watched on in horror, but he was a champion swimmer and dived in without hesitation. Over and over, he swam 30 feet down in the freezing water, pulling victims from the bus and bringing them to shore. This went on for almost half an hour, and he saved 20 people before collapsing from exhaustion. His lungs became severely infected from the polluted water, ending his athletic career. But his heroic act was never forgotten. If you stepped on the wrong tile, it would push down on a hidden lever. This would release a string, which ran under the floor and up to a series of crossbows. Once the string snapped back, the arrows were triggered, shooting right at the spot where you stood. Now, you might think this only exists in movies, but according to legend, one ancient Chinese tomb actually uses this booby trap. Only no one's ever dared to open it and find out. The redheads would rise from the dead as vampires, hunting for blood according to the legend. You see, people in ancient Greece believed they wouldn't stay buried after death. That's because red hair was uncommon in that region, and some thought it was a sign of supernatural powers. Because redheads often had pale skin and burned easily in the sun, they were linked to creatures of the night. And some feared them so much that red-haired bodies were burned to stop them from returning. They inserted a tube into the rectum and pumped tobacco smoke into the body. The belief was that the warmth and stimulation of the smoke would encourage breathing. The nicotine in the tobacco was thought to stimulate the hearts and lungs, reviving the patient. A bellows was used to blow the smoke into the body, usually through the rectal tube. This practice was eventually abandoned when doctors realized it was not effective and actually harmful. His car burst into flames, completely consuming the young man inside. But when his girlfriend tried to claim his life insurance, investigators noticed something strange. The body's DNA actually belonged to an 81-year-old woman. You see, the couple had dug up the corpse, placed it in the car, and then set it on fire. Next, the man dyed his hair and pretended to be the woman's new boyfriend. But when police found him, he confessed to faking his own death, and they both got extended prison time. If you stuck two AA batteries in your brain, you might think they'd be enough to power it all day. But your brain actually uses the same amount of power as a light bulb at any given moment. That means you would need over 160 AAs for just 1 day of brain power. And to run it for a year would take nearly 60,000 batteries, enough to fill an entire dumpster. And over your lifetime, your brain would use over 4 million of them. And if you stacked them up, they'd reach more than halfway to the International Space Station. The snake fell, landing on her arm and wrapping around it tight. You see, a hawk flying by had accidentally dropped it, and the bird suddenly swooped down and tried to take back its lunch. The snake squeezed tighter as the hawk scratched and pecked at her arm, but finally it pulled the snake off and flew away, leaving the woman injured but happy to be alive. You might be placed inside a metal bowl that's set over a fire if you were tortured hundreds of years ago. This was known as the brazen bowl, and you would be slowly roasted alive as the metal was heated up. Or you could be tied down with a cage of hungry rats strapped to your stomach. Hot coals placed on top would cause the rats to burrow into your flesh to escape the heat. And sometimes little screws would be placed on your fingers and toes. Over time, they'd be slowly tightened until they began to crush your fingers. The soldiers fired at the magician, who would catch the bullets between her teeth. You see, the bullets were actually blanks, and when they fired, she would reveal the ones she had hidden in her mouth. But one soldier forgot to swap his round, and when the guns fired, a real bullet struck her in the stomach. Her husband rushed to help her, but the wound was too severe, and both she and their unborn child died just 2 days later. The 7 barrels on the gun were fired at once and were designed for war at sea, but the force of shooting 7 bullets pushed the gun violently backwards, and it was so strong that it could break your shoulder, especially if you were shooting from the ship's sails. That's because you'd have no solid footing to absorb the kick, so the force would travel directly into your bones, and it could even knock you right out of the ropes, meaning you'd break more than just your shoulder. A blind man grabbed its tusk and was left thinking that the elephant was smooth and pointy like a spear. Another blind man wrapped his arms around a leg, thinking that the entire animal was thick and round like a tree. The third blind man touched the ear and thought the elephant was wide and floppy like a wing. When it walked away, the 3 men were left arguing, each one sure that he was right about what it must look like. But none of them had the full picture. Each had only a small part of the truth, but mistook it for the whole. And if they had listened to each other, they might just have realized what they were missing. When you inhale a cigarette, your airways get covered in a sticky black tar, making it hard to breathe. The chemicals kill the tiny hair-like structures inside that help clear out mucus and dirt. And without them, harmful substances build up, causing infections and coughing. Over time, the smoke scars your lung tissue, making them stiff and weak. And eventually, your lungs become too damaged to function, leaving you unable to breathe on your own. As they released the 1.5 million balloons, people were cheering. But soon, a sudden storm forced the balloons back down, blanketing highways and causing car accidents. Planes and helicopters were grounded as balloons filled the air and landed on runways. 2 fishermen went missing around that time, but as searchers looked, balloons flooded the lake, halting rescue efforts. Click here to watch the full story. He attacked his mother-in-law with an iron bar and began stabbing her repeatedly. Then he turned on his father-in-law, choking and stabbing him before leaving them both bleeding. Covered in blood, he drove straight to a police station and confessed, saying he had just killed 2 people. But he insisted that he was sleepwalking the entire time. Experts claim he had no control over his actions, trapped in a deep sleep state. The jury believed him and he was free to go. If you get struck by lightning, most people think you die, but that's not always the case. The current is hotter than the sun's surface and can cause severe burns that leave marks in the shape of lightning. But some of the current might still reach inside you, affecting the brain and causing confusion. It can also disrupt your heart's rhythm, so if you do die from a lightning strike, it's most likely to be from a heart attack. The prisoner's brain is scanned, and fake memories are custom built for them. These are designed to make them feel guilty for their crimes and are created by AI. Lasers are then used to store them in the prisoner's DNA. And this process only takes a few minutes. Once they have the new memories, the prisoner is monitored and released within days. This method has already been tested on animals, meaning these prisons could be a reality within the next 10 years. When early humans pooped, they didn't have to wipe, and this was because they squatted instead of sitting, which helped everything come out quickly. And they also ate a lot of raw plants, which were full of fiber. This made their poop firm and dry, so nothing really stuck. But as we started eating softer, processed foods, our poop became stickier. Now, instead of coming out clean, it smears as it's pushed out, which means wiping is necessary.